It's 7:02, and we'll call the meeting to order. All members are present, and we'll begin with the transmitting of Treasury warrants 42, 42A, 43, 43A, and 43B. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Made and seconded. Anything further? All in favor? It's unanimous. And we have approval of the minutes of December 22, 2008. Probably a good time to welcome and acknowledge newest member, Mike Shampoo. Good evening, welcome.
Thank you.
You may want to abstain on these minutes as you weren't here. Do we have a motion from anyone else on the board?
Make a motion that we approve the minutes of December 22nd, 2008.
Second.
Made and seconded. Anything further? All in favor? Opposed? 4 in favor and 1 abstention. Our first appointment is scheduled for 7 o'clock with Scott C. Garant. He's the chairman of the 4th of July Committee, and it's regarding a request to use Town Common for the annual 4th of July festivities. Mr. Garant.
Gentlemen,
Good evening.
on behalf of the committee, I'm proud to announce that this year's event will run through July 1st through July 5th. That's Wednesday through Sunday. Family Day is on July 4th proper. Family Day fireworks are that evening, and the big fireworks are Sunday, July 5th, with a rain date, an unnecessary rain date, of July the 6th, Monday the 6th. We're delighted once again to have more than 24 Wilmington-based nonprofit groups participating as sponsors, as fundraisers, and cooking meals on the Common. On behalf of the committee and the residents for whom the committee presents the celebration, I'd like to express our gratitude both to the board and to Mr. Kyra and his staff, as well as to the staff and department heads of the building department, the health department, police department, fire department, Department of Public Works, Department of Public Buildings, and the Wilmington School Department. Be happy to answer any questions. I'd also mention that if anyone has any questions or looking for information, our website is funonthefourth.com, all spelled out. Has all the dates, has the entry forms for the events, etc.
Questions or comments from the board?
Just one comment I'd like to make is once again I'd like to thank community organizations always do an outstanding job, and always volunteerism is always strong and well here in the community, and I think we all know that. And a lot of folks around the community, I've said it several times, outside of Wilmington enjoy the festivities, so it's really a spectacular day and a week event. Thank you.
It's our pleasure.
I agree with Selectman McCoy. You have a wonderful committee that works very hard year-round.
Thank you. From one committee member to another, thank you.
Anything else? I know that you know the rest of the board shares those sentiments. So we have a motion on the request.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we request, give the permit as stated here under the appointments.
I'll second.
Made and seconded. Anything further? All in favor? It's unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, if I may just have one more moment.
Certainly.
Over the past several years, the committee has benefited from generous support from local businesses, local groups, and individuals as well. At the same time, in the past few years, much as the town has, we've worked very hard to lower our costs, keep costs in check. As a result, we voted unanimously at our last meeting to make a presentation to the town of $5,000 to help defray the town's costs for the annual celebration. I'd like to present that to the chairman.
Oh, never turn down a check. Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate it. Extend our thanks to the entire committee.
I shall. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
I'm surprised you stayed in your seat. So I'm surprised he remained in his seat. I would have thought he was running to grab that. 7:10 appointment agenda item is a discussion with Michael A. Kyra, Town Manager, regarding the status of local aid.
Mr. Chairman, I provided you with 2 documents, which were also provided to the press, just to try to summarize what is happening with local aid. The first is something that came from the Department of Revenue's Division of Local Services, and it is entitled the Fiscal Year 2010 Local Aid Estimates And what you see before you is the fiscal year 2009 cherry sheet estimates, the original numbers, and then the governor's budget House 1 proposal, and then finally the proposal that came from the House Ways and Means. The key numbers here are under education, Chapter 70. You see that it is level funded all the way through. Last year's allocation from the state for Chapter 70 education aid was $9,957,000, and that was the same number that was carried in the governor's budget proposal, and the same number that was carried by House Ways and Means. There are some minor changes in some of the other line items in terms of school transportation and charter tuition reimbursement, et cetera. But basically, the main number that we've been working with all the way through for local aid has been that $9.9 million number. Where things change a bit is under general government. The general government line items in past years used to be listed as lottery aid and additional assistance. And as you can see, Wilmington's numbers from the past years, 2009 original number, totaled $3,094,812. That was prior to the 9 C cuts, when that number was reduced by $301,000. The governor's numbers, which are now looked at as unrestricted general government aid. They've changed the category from what you receive in lottery and additional assistance or any additional lottery monies. They've changed that category to call it unrestricted general government aid. And that number has gone from the original number of $3,094,000 to the lesser number after the 9 C cuts of about $2.8 million to the governor's number of $2,211,000. From there, the House Ways and Means budget proposal reduced it another $116,000 to $2,094,000. So when we look at the two major categories of local aid, from the governor's initial number to the House Ways and Means budget proposal, Chapter 70 school aid remains the same, but the unrestricted general government aid is reduced by about $116,000. When you look at the bottom line numbers, there are substantial differences in how some of the funds are allotted. The governor's budget includes additional money based upon revenue from increases in meals taxes and room taxes. The House Ways and Means budget does not include that. The governor's budget includes some amount of money for police career incentive, which is commonly referred to as the Quinn bill, where they have underfunded based upon last year, at least the town, to the tune of about $50,000, and they funded it at $136,000. The House Ways and Means budget proposal zeroed that out. It didn't fund it at all. Now there has been, as you've read in the newspaper, a strong effort to restore the Quinn bill money, and if that is restored at 100%, that would come back to about $180,000 for the town of Wilmington. All said, we are really dealing with a problem in the major accounts of about $116,000, because that's where we differed in our own estimates in our fiscal year 2010 budget. Again, there's short amounts in different of the categories, but we never, as you know, included any monies coming from revenues from meals tax or room tax in our estimate, so we're not that much further behind. Had we done that, then of course we would have been talking about a much larger projected deficit if the House Ways and Means budget went forward. At this point, the difference between our estimate and the governor's estimate, we are estimating $14,804,000. The governor is estimating $15,156,000, considerably more money than we are, but that again is based upon new revenues that have not been adopted yet by the Commonwealth. And the House Ways and Means budget is actually about $260,000 less than what, well, about $230,000, excuse me, less than what we had anticipated. But if they restore Quinn, there's $180,000 or so there. So at this point, I think the likelihood of any kind of a delta, any kind of a disparity between the town's projection on local aid would be around $116,000 negative. That said, I know the House was dealing with the budget today. The Senate still has not taken up the budget, and at this point, it's our intention, although we will be having further discussions with the financial officers and with the chairman of the Finance Committee, it's our intention at this point to go with the numbers at town meeting that we have budgeted for. I think that we can make any adjustments if in the end we're only talking in the area of $100,000 or so. So I'll be happy to answer any of the local aid related questions that you might have at this time, Mr. Chairman, or members of the board, and you've seen all the documents that I continue to send to you from the Mass Municipal Association and others talking about impacts. Clearly, Wilmington would be impacted, and what might happen is that we would have to delay or defer certain of our capital activities, or we might even have to just continue to keep positions vacant. As you know, we have not been filling positions. That said, there's no plans to lay anybody off. There's no plans to institute any user fees, and there is certainly no plan to ask for additional local taxes.
Questions or comments?
I just have a quick question here. Mike, the vet's blind and surviving spouse, exemptions, line item 8, how come there's nothing on there in the 010 budget from the state?
They have, what they've done is they've added those two columns. If you look down to where it says elderly, and they're making that all one column. And so if you look back at the what comes from the Department of Revenue, you'll see that they've included it all as one: vets, blind, surviving spouses, and elderly, and they've done it at $138,000.
Okay.
The other, it's a good question because it's always been separated, and that's how it's all. This local aid sheet that comes from our budget has always been based upon a separation of those two numbers. This year, they're combining those numbers.
Anything else from the board? All right, thanks for that update. Our next scheduled appointment is a discussion item with Michael A. Kira, Town Manager, regarding a report on the damage to the historic Wilmington Town Pound and proposal to relocate structure within the Wilmington Historic District.
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to give you a little background on this. I know that many people have been concerned about what they saw as the partial destruction of the town pound, which is a stone edifice at the corner of Glen Road. Just as you enter Glen Road from Middlesex Avenue, it is on the right-hand side. It is actually located at 9 Glen Road, and I asked Terry McDermott and Carolyn Harris of the Historical Commission to put together a little bit of background on this. The pound itself is attached to private property, owned by private property owners, and although it is clearly an important artifact of Wilmington's history, back in 1911, for whatever reason, the town of Wilmington decided to sell that property, and so it's been in private ownership since that time. From time to time, there have been discussions and efforts, including some of my own, along with Carolyn Harris, to the various property owners to see if they would be willing to give the town some rights legal rights to that property, but that has not been the case. You will recall that back in the early 90s, early to mid-90s, the Scalekeeper's house was also located at that site, and the then owners decided, although they had no problem with the town pound being there, they wanted the Scalekeeper's house removed. And so we didn't have much of a choice except if we wanted to save it, which was to remove it. And I'm sure you'll remember the pictures in the papers with the crane that we hired, and it was quite a involved project handled by the Department of Public Works with private contractors, and we moved the Scalekeeper's house over into what still is the historic district, but over by the old cemetery, again on Middlesex Avenue, across from the current cemetery. As a history of the pound, you should know that every community in Massachusetts was required by law at one time to build and maintain a town pound, which was an enclosed area that was maintained by the town as a place to keep stray animals. It also, in a rural society, was a system for controlling and collecting any wayward animals. The pound itself is a fieldstone enclosure 15 feet by 18 feet, and it was built back in 1814, according to town records, on land given to the town by William Blanchard. As I indicated, in 1911, the town voted at a town meeting to sell the property back, and deed records confirm that. We again had tried on a number of occasions to have the town pound end up in the hands of the town through restrictions or otherwise, but that was never successful. In 1992, the Wilmington Center Village Historic District was placed in the National Register of Historic Places, and the town pound was cited several times in the National Register nomination form as a contributing structure to the historic district, but nevertheless it was still private property. Unfortunately, the current homeowners, unfortunately for the town, felt it would be in their best interest to have the stones removed, and they began to do that not this past weekend, but the weekend before, and they were asked if they would stop until they had a discussion with the town, and they were willing to do that, and they've been very cooperative since that date, so I want to make that clear. But when we talked to them, they made it clear that they were not interested in having the structure remain, and the structure now was already partially destroyed. And when I say destroyed, it was, the rocks are still there, but they were taken off of each other. The rocks are built 3 or 4 rocks high, and they are no longer in the same formation, which certainly affected the historic integrity of the structure. We discussed with them the opportunity to be able to do something with the stones. We did talk with town council's office to determine whether or not we had any specific rights to the property, and they have confirmed that it is in fact the property of the folks that live there at 9 Glen Road. So I talked with the Historical Commission and the Department of Public Works about the possibility of moving the structure, and we have decided to go forward, unless there is objection from this board, to move the structure rather than have it dismantled and sold by the current owners. They've agreed to give us the structure, provided that we move it. We have found a location for it that I think is appropriate. It is going to be right by the Scalekeeper's house, which is where it was in the first place, but only on Glen Road. We would like to be able to make that kind of a move. We will put it behind the Scalekeeper's house until at some point in the future we're able to re-erect the stone wall and put it at what hopefully will be a final resting place beside the Scalekeeper's house. The plan initially was to do that tomorrow, Tuesday, April 28th. We are now pushing that off until Wednesday. We've discussed that with the homeowner, and And the reason is there was a North Reading police officer that some of you know who passed away, and the funeral arrangements are being made out of the Nichols Funeral Home and also at the Wilmington Methodist Church. Although the burial will be in North Reading, there will be activity in that area. There will be processions, there will be honor guards, and it was my feeling that we did not want to in any way be disrespectful to that activity, and therefore it was best to move it until Wednesday. The homeowners agreed. So that's where we're at. I know there has been some concern expressed by the community. We received some phone calls and some discussion about it over the weekend when we ran into folks, and I know the Historical Commission has as well, and I expect you have also. But it was something that was totally unexpected. Obviously, I think the town has reacted in the best way possible, and I'll be happy to answer any questions, but that's the status of the pound at this point.
Questions or comments?
I have a question. Mike, you mentioned on the onset of your comments that there's potentially changing or removing or having the stones collapse on themselves. Will that have an impact on the historical significance of it as a pound? In other words, it ceases to be what it was once we take it down and put it somewhere else.
It's a good point. It has less historic integrity, but it's still the pound. It's just, it would have greater historic value if it were located at its in the same spot. An example of that might be the Butters Farm, which, as you may recall, the discussion was, could we just move the farm to an adjacent location? The reason why the Historical Commission didn't want to do that is because it would lose some of its historical integrity by being moved, but the farm itself would still be historic. In this case, the scalekeeper's house, which has been moved, certainly lost some of its integrity because it's not there anymore, but the fact that it was saved, I suppose, and I think I mentioned this before, and it's probably a trite expression, but it's almost a half a loaf is better than none at this point. But you are right. There is some historic value that is diminished as a result of this. But the moment those rocks were moved, and you've probably seen it, and folded in to the enclosure, the historical integrity of the property was damaged.
If I may, is the Historic Commission, are they on board with the idea of reassembling the pound in the new location? Do they feel that that's a given, that we can't undo this? Is that they're in favor of this?
I can tell you that the chairperson she's had some discussions, but they have a regular meeting tonight, and I'll talk with her first thing in the morning, but the impression that I have is that there's unanimous agreement to save the property and to relocate it.
Thank you.
And we will do it, by the way, with town forces. We'll do it on the during the regular working hours. It may spill over a little bit of overtime, but we believe we can get it all done during the week, during the day, without having to contract out for any of the services. The cost, the ultimate cost, is going to be a determination made by this board and maybe the town meeting at some time in the future when it has to be reassembled, because at that point it will have to be reassembled by a professional in that business. And one of the things I found out is that there are professionals in that business.
So we're relocating it and effectively just creating a pile of rocks.
Well, yeah, a systematic pile of rocks.
Okay.
It's been, it's a good point also. It was Adele Passmore, who many of you know and has been involved with historical-related projects. Spoke with Mrs. Harris and I last week and got our permission and then got the permission from the homeowners to literally number the rocks in a sequence. Dawn Onasite went down and took photos. So when we move the stones, we're going to move them carefully, and then we're going to retain the opportunity to give a professional an opportunity to reconstruct the pound.
It's, to me, it sounds as though you're playing the hand the best, with the cards you've been dealt, the best you can to get the best result, so. Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you for that update. We'll move to our 7:30 discussion item, which is a discussion and assignment of motions for the annual town meeting.
Mr. Chairman, you should have your Finance Committee books. If you need one, we can get any others, but they've also been provided to the press if they're interested in following along. And this is the meeting that we typically make the assignments for members of the Board of Selectmen and others who will offer the motion at the meeting. If you go to page 2 of the document, a reminder to everyone that the town meeting is Saturday at 10:30, held at the high school gymnasium. We need 150 people to begin as a quorum, and I hope folks are able to be there. The first article is Article 2, which is an article that we'll move to take no action on because there are no committees scheduled to report. And then Article 3, which we will move not to adopt because we have no unpaid bills from prior years. Those are pretty perfunctory. Article 4, and with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'll start with you unless somebody has an objection, and then go by seniority to Selectman McCoy, Selectman Lepore, Selectman Semaglia, and then Selectman Shampoo. And we've been through all these articles, but if you want to stop me and have questions, just let me know. I'll just try to give as brief a summary as possible. Article 4 would be offered by Chairman Newhouse, and it's the annual article that authorizes the treasurer collector to enter into agreements to provide banking services. Article 5 and all of the subsequent sub-articles that are a part of the budget process will be offered by the Finance Committee, and I would suggest that if you go to page 12, we can begin the remaining articles to be offered by the Board of Selectmen. Article 6 are the capital outlay articles. The purchase of the police cruisers would be Selectman McCoy, and again, we will have all the actual motions prepared, as you know, but Selectman McCoy would have that, and the amount of money that we're asking for there for the 4 cruisers is $119,700. The next motion would be offered by Selectman Lepore, and it is to purchase the replacement ambulance, and we expect that cost would be about $180,000. The next motion would be Selectman Semaglia to purchase the aerial ladder truck, which is going to be done by borrowing. We believe that number now can be reduced to about $975,000. As you know, we were looking at in excess of 1.1, but right now, what we're looking at, and given the climate out there, we think that we'll be able to make that purchase somewhere between $950 and $975. The next article would be offered by Selectman Shampoo, and it is for the purchase and installation of the accessible chairlift at the West Intermediate School, so folks can have access to the stage area. That would be for $19,500. And the final motion under Article 6 would be offered by Chairman Newhouse to purchase the 2 pieces of equipment for the Department of Public Works, the heavy-duty rack body truck for the tree division, and the sidewalk plow with the flail mower for the highway division. Again, $308,300. Article 7 would be offered by Selectman McCoy to purchase the Emergency Medical Services computer system for the fire department. That's $45,000. Article 8 would be offered by the school committee. That is for the purchase of the technology equipment for the high school at $138,850. Article 9 would be offered by Selectman Lepore. We're asking for $60,000 to purchase and install an upgraded fire alarm system at the Wildwood School. Article 10 would be offered by Mr. Semaglia. It would be $150,000 for that same purpose, except in this case for the Shawsheen School. Article 11 would be offered by Selectman Shampoo, It is to appropriate money to replace the existing asbestos vinyl tile floors at the Woburn Street School with the vinyl composite floor tiles, and we're looking for $235,400 for that purpose. Article 12 would be offered by Chairman Newhouse. This also would be a borrowing. The new window replacement at the Shawshene School with energy-efficient windows. In this case, we believe we'll need about $715,000, where we're able to come down significantly with the, about a little over $200,000 with the ladder truck. In this case, we need to go up by about $95,000 on the borrowing, because we have better numbers now for the Shawshene School window replacement project. Article 13 would be offered by Selectman McCoy. It would be to authorize the demolition and subsequent removal of the Swain School from that site, along with the transfer from the public schools, the management and control of that site to the Board of Selectmen and Town Manager. That would be $160,000. Article number 14 would be the authorization for a $2.1 million borrowing that would be offered by the Water and Sewer Commission to replace the Browns Crossing wellfield and pump station. Again, at this, we were looking at one point for this to be about $2.5 million. That's actually what was in the budget. We've done some more engineering on that, and we believe that number is going to be closer to between $2 and $2.1 million on that borrowing. And the borrowing would be through water revenues. Article 15, which would be from general, would be a general fund revenue borrowing of $1,250,000, would also be, the motion would also be offered by the Water and Sewer Commission, and it would be funds to rehabilitate the Main Street sanitary sewer interceptor line. I will offer Article 16. It is not yet completely prepared. It is the transfer article where we balance the current budget, in this case the fiscal year 2009 budget. We're looking in the vicinity of $900,000 or so in deficits to come up with funds to balance that. There are three major accounts that were in deficit, and all of them fairly obvious, I think. Snow and ice, which appears to be around $320,000 in deficit. Fuel heating, which is about $525,000. And again, these numbers have not been finalized, but we hope to have that be the case by Saturday. And also veterans assistance, which is about $80,000. We're identifying areas within the budget, including the Finance Committee reserve, possibly surplus funds from overlay abatements in prior years, along with other surplus accounts to make up for any of these 2009 deficit accounts. Article 17 would be offered by Selectman Lepore, and this is to continue the Senior Citizen Work Opportunity Program that the town has. In this case, the dollar amount would be $15,360. Article 18 would be offered by Selectman Semaglia, and that would be the $6,000 for the observance of Memorial and Veterans Day. Article 19 would be offered by Selectman Shampoo, the $1,500 to appropriate for the purpose of renewing leases for VFW and the American Legion. Again, a standard article. Article 20 is a new article to Wilmington. It would be offered by Chairman Newhouse. You will recall we had discussions with the town accountant about this at a prior meeting. It would establish a new stabilization fund for other post-employment benefits that complies with GASB, the Governmental Accounting Standard Board, in this case statement number 45, and it would provide initial funding in the amount of $100,000. Article 21 would be offered by Selectman McCoy. It is the standard article that enables the town to reauthorize its revolving accounts, specifically the compost bin revolving account and the sewage disposal upgrade revolving account. It establishes spending limits for both. This is not an appropriation item. Article 22 would be offered by Selectman Lepore, and this, again, is similar to past articles where it enables the town to continue its participation in MWRA financial assistance programs that provide grants and interest-free loans to reduce infiltration and inflow, and also to assist in our sewer rehabilitation system program. In this case, we're hoping that additional funds will become available beyond the normal amounts, and so we're writing the motion to include the upset number. We're hoping to receive up to $189,000 in outright grants for this program and $231,000 in interest-free loans. So this would enable the town to participate in this program, presuming it gets funded. Article 23 would be offered by Selectman Semaglia. And again, we've had numerous discussion about the MTBE products liability litigation settlements. We now need to take those funds that we've received from the settlements from the various companies, which amount to $858,712.12 at this point, and we would request that they be transferred into the Water Department fund. Article 24 would be offered by the Water and Sewer Commission, and that would be our entry into the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority as a permanent member for the supplemental public water supply. I'm happy to report that the Wednesday, I think it was the Wednesday or Thursday following, I guess it was the Thursday following our meeting, last meeting in April. I did attend the Board of Directors meeting for the MWRA in Charlestown, and happy to report that we received unanimous vote of approval to join. At this point, the legislation that we also need is being shepherded by Representative Maselli and Senator Tarr, and it's my understanding that there will be a hearing on Thursday of this week before the Natural Resources Committee, and on the bill that was sponsored by Representative Maselli, House 4044, that he has indicated to us is on a fast track, and hopefully it would be adopted perhaps by the end of this week and go to the government's desk for signature. Certainly we appreciate the effort of our legislative delegation at this point to get this important legislation adopted. Article 25 would be offered by Selectman Shampoo, and this is to adopt the excavation and trench safety bylaws that are coming forward as a result of state statute, new state law. I know that the health director is shepherding this and has spoken about this certainly at the Finance Committee hearing. We believe we're going to be able to offer a motion that essentially adopts what is before you, as opposed to having to read the entire motion. That's something that we've been doing in recent years. Article number 26 would be offered by Chairman Newhouse, and this is the request to seek enactment of special legislation to exempt the town from liability with regard to the Maple Meadow landfill solid waste site. Article number 27 would be offered by Selectman McCoy, and this is the bylaw regarding the public consumption of marijuana. And again, just as the Health Director, Shelley Newhouse, will be available to assist in the explanation of the excavation and trench safety, we'll be able to count on Police Chief Bogonis being able to speak to this issue as well. Article 28, the stormwater management bylaw, would be offered by Selectman Semaglia, and again, we've had discussion about this with Carol Hamilton, and she and other members of the senior management staff will be available to speak about this issue and the importance of establishing a specific comprehensive stormwater management bylaw for the town. And finally, Article 29 is the seeks enactment of special legislation to exempt the position of fire chief from the state civil service law, and I will plan to offer that particular motion unless there are objections. The rest of the motions, the rest of the articles from Article 30 to Article 42 are all petition articles that have been discussed here. I've become aware that there may be one of these articles that may be withdrawn, and that would be Article number 39, which was one of the 3 petitioned articles submitted by Craig Newhouse, but the other 2 would remain. That's my understanding from a conversation today. That's not official unless the withdrawal comes in, and that's the only other information I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Questions or comments? We all set on the assignment of the motion? Hearing no questions or comments, I think we can move to communications.
You have the memorandum from me regarding the recommendations relative to the sale of town-owned land at the annual town meeting. We've determined that all of the land except for the portion described in Article 40 is not surplus. So all of the surplus requests that have come forward in the various articles that we've discussed in the past, unless you want me to review them, be happy to, but since we've talked about them in the past, we've determined that they're all not surplus, and this is based upon the recommendations of the Property Review Board. The one item that is the partial land that is contained within Article 40 as a part of Eleanor Estates. We've established a value for that at $132,964. If the town adopts that article, that is the amount of money that the principal assessor and the Board of Assessors has determined to be the fair market value for that property. It cannot be sold, it will not be sold for less than that. Questions? You have information from Governor Patrick's office, which was his initial plan to close the additional state budget deficit for fiscal year 2009, and he talked about eliminating more than 750 state positions, also taking some additional monies from the what's referred to as the rainy day fund, using some of the federal recovery funds, and making other mid-year cuts. Fortunately for us, there was no additional 9C cuts in local aid for fiscal year 2009 beyond what we were already affected by, that $301,000. You also have been receiving frequent alerts, as you know, from the Mass Municipal Association regarding the 2010 local aid budget and the amendments that the MMA is putting forward, both in terms of their opposition as well as their support, and they talk about all of those various items that refer to eliminating certain loopholes in the system, increasing funding, supporting new revenue enhancements, etc. All of what we've talked about in the past, including the Municipal Reform Act. In the same vein, we have a letter from Mark Drayson of the Metropolitan Area Planning Council regarding the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, where he has stated what we know to be true at this point, and that is most of the funding to date is going through to transportation projects that are being distributed primarily for state projects and for MBTA transportation-related projects. We're working with them to make it clear that we are among the municipalities that believe that we have some shovel-ready projects, and we're asking that they go forward, and we've been in contact with our legislative delegation as well. I don't have tremendous confidence at this point that we're going to see some of that money in terms of any immediate money in terms of our own infrastructure projects, but we'll continue to push, as are most every community. And that's not to say that Wilmington will not be the beneficiary from projects that may go through the town, like on Route 93, for example, but at this point, we're not seeing any of our specific projects being funded. I want to provide the board with an updated memorandum on the MTBE products liability litigation, in this case, that consistent with your settlement discussions. We did receive a settlement check in accordance with your approval of the settlement from Getty Petroleum Marketing, Inc. And in this case, the total made payable to the town of Wilmington for deposit to the Water and Sewer Department was $11,850.21. That amount is in addition to the $846,000 already received, and is consistent with the dollar number I just mentioned during the assignment of motions of over $858,000 from this settlement. As you know, the town is among 80 Massachusetts public water providers and hundreds of others nationwide who participated in this class action lawsuit. The board received a letter from Frank Anzalotti, the executive director of the Massachusetts Package Stores Association, requesting to change the date on a one-day alcohol license that you issued from September 29th, 2010 to October 6th, 2010. Shortly after Mr. Anzalotti met with the board on April 13th, he was informed by the Shriners organization that the particular date had been booked and there was a scheduling conflict. He had thought that he had that particular date and found out that it was changed on him. And so now he is coming back to the board and asking about October 6th instead of September 29th. He's requesting the same circumstance in this case, except a week later, and that would be to have the one-day alcohol license from 12 noon to 10 p.m. On October 6, 2010. We received this call, I think the next day, talked to the chairman about it, reached out to all involved, and at this point there is really nothing that would prohibit the board from making a subsequent motion, and if so, and if you determine to do that, we'll release the license and collect the fee.
Does anyone want to move to reconsider the application to change the date and presumably keep all of the conditions in place?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Made and seconded. Anything further? Just a procedural item here, Mike. I'm trying to think through whether or not Mr. Shampoo would want to. I don't see a problem with taking a vote on it.
If the motion is to reconsider, I would say probably he should not vote unless you're going to have a subsequent motion to then vote on the license.
It's all one. Yeah, any problem with doing it all in one motion, Mike, and leaving you out of it? Okay.
I don't want to part with procedure, though.
No, we're trying to keep it simple and efficient, so. Any other questions or comments? All in favor? 4 in favor, and I think because it was a reconsideration, Mike, I'm going to note you as an abstention, okay?
Thank you. You have the standard correspondence that we get each year from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council and the MBT Advisory Board regarding the municipal elections to the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization. They're notifying folks that anybody who's interested in being a candidate, the candidates must be either a mayor or a chairman of a board of selectmen within the various communities within this geographic district. They're all listed for you, and this is just a call at this point for nominations. Certainly you can look that over. We have not received any information yet from any of the communities expressing an interest. We'll get a second piece of correspondence soon, sometime after May 15th, when nomination papers are due, and then an election date will be established in June. And again, it's limited to a mayor or a chairman of the board, and both as the chief elected official, both in terms of the actual person who casts the vote and the person who can run for the office. The board has received correspondence from the Massachusetts Coalition for Jobs and Growth regarding a request to endorse the Coalition for Jobs and Growth's position to support casino gaming in Massachusetts. You have a rather lengthy letter. You've seen these letters in the past from this group. It has been endorsed in this case by the mayors of Revere, Salem, and Boston, as well as the city manager of Chelsea, and they're asking for the town of Wilmington's support for the House 1 and 3 resort casino proposal that was put forward by initially by Governor Patrick. This coalition was created to support the 3 gaming, entertainment, and destination venues that they believe would result in addressing the unemployment situation, as well as in generating hundreds of millions of dollars in new local aid. I don't believe the board has taken a position on this in the past, and I'm not sure what their position is at this point.
I don't know if anybody, anyone on the board has any comments. I'm certainly have an opinion on the subject, but I've never been comfortable casting a vote here based on understanding some more of the details. So I don't know if the board wants to just generally plan on taking this up, and if so, I'll try and get some more information on the board.
Mr. Chair, I feel pretty much the same way you do on this, and I have no reason to maybe continue with it.
So we'll pull some other information together for the benefit of the board.
The board has correspondence from Donna Gasick, the executive director of WCTV. She's provided a copy of their annual report, which I believe all of you have that copy. She speaks about the 21 years that the WCTV has been a part of this community, and this year, of course, they're celebrating their new relocation to a contemporary facility at 10 Waltham Street here in Wilmington, which is right off of Middlesex Avenue. And again, they invite both students, senior citizens, individuals, families, businesses to join if they would be interested, and to join WCTV and become a part of the fine organization that it is. We certainly appreciate the good work that Dawn and Ron do for us every meeting. And anybody interested in a copy of the report, I'm sure can get that from WCTV. It's quite informative. Mr. Chairman, customarily at this time, I bring forward to you a list of the appointments that the Board of Selectmen would normally make at their first meeting in May, which is scheduled for May 11th. I only list these names because they're incumbents, and of course, the board is obviously not bound by any of this whatsoever. There is one vacancy on the Board of Appeals for a 5-year term to expire in 2014, and the incumbent is Robert Doucette. There is a vacancy on the Board of Registrars to expire in 2012, and when I say vacancy, there will be a vacancy. This is a 3-year term, and the incumbent is Alice Hooper. There is 3 individuals whose terms expire on the Council for the Arts in 2011, Jane Crane, Barbara Forrestall, and H. Elizabeth White. We have a anticipated vacancy on the Scholarship Fund Committee. I've heard from John DeMarco, who has been a valuable member of that committee for many, many years. He will no longer be able to serve as he's moving from Wilmington, and his term, there are 2 years left on his 3-year term, and so that there'll be an unexpired term to expire in 2011, and a vacancy at this point on that committee. In the past, you've asked me to consult with the superintendent of schools. I can do that again. Certainly take any names that the board is interested in as well. And the board also has the position of town council to fill. This is a 1-year term that expires by contract on June 30, 2010. The incumbent, Deutsch, Williams, Brooks, Durensis, and Holland. And then there are a number of constables whose positions are annual appointments. They include Paul D. Bruce Jr., Paul J. Bruno Sr., Alan C. Hunter, Cheryl M. Pryor, Charles E. Rooney Jr., all of these without any restrictions, and then the following with restrictions not to solicit clients but have authority to serve civil process for clients who need service into Wilmington. That would be John B. Bridges Jr., Dean DeVito, Ronald M. DeGiorgio, Michael Garrigan, Wilfred A. Lambert, John Milano, David H. Muskovitz, John J. Irwine, Anthony J. Saya, Raymond C. Spinazzola, and William J. Zampel Jr. And finally, Ellen G. Davis Sawyer in conjunction with her duties as an animal control officer. Those are the positions that are to be appointed by the Board of Selectmen at the May 11th meeting. I'll also be offering my appointments publicly at that time, and there'll be appointments that we'll need confirmation on as well. Mr. Chairman, you also, in conjunction with that, have letters of interest from both Paul Bruce Jr. and John Irwine seeking reappointment. The board has received a letter and an invitation to attend the installation of officers ceremonies for the Tewksbury Wilmington Emblem Club on Monday, May 11th, 2009 at 7 p.m. And as the board is well aware, that is a meeting date. This conflict has happened in the past, and I've written to them on behalf of the Board of Selectmen. And Mr. Chairman, if you would like to so authorize, we have a letter of commendation and congratulations that we can send off with a letter from you. I presume no one from the board would be attending, unless they would be missing this meeting.
Yeah, that sounds good.
If you wanted to sign that, I'll make sure that gets out.
Thank you.
Thank you. The board has a letter from the Wilmington Band Parents and Friends, specifically Kevin Blyer, the president, who is requesting permission to sell coffee, donuts, popcorn, cold drinks, and balloons in front of the Roman House during this year's Memorial Day Parade. It requires the approval of the Board of Selectmen.
Do we have any questions, comments, or a motion?
I make the motion, we allow them the band parents to sell coffee, donuts, popcorn, cold drinks, and balloons during the Memorial Day Parade.
Second.
Made and seconded. Anything further? All in favor? It's unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the regular business before the board.
Public comments? Yes, Mr. West. I'm sorry?
Yeah, I'm from the Lowell Sun, Keith O'Neill. I just have a question about the animal pound. Now, did the resident, did he actually make any attempt to contact the town before he decided to tear it down, or did he just do this without warning?
He did not contact the town recently. The arrangement that we understood from a discussion with the Historical Commission chairperson, Carolyn Harris, was that several months ago, maybe even a year ago, they had discussion about the pound, and he expressed some concerns with it. What Mrs. Harris related to me was that she spoke with him and said, be happy to arrange a meeting when you know what it is you would like to have done with the pound, and would be happy to take any action to shore it up if that's what it needed, to clean it out, to do whatever needed to be done. There may have been a communication breakdown, at least according to the property owners. It was our belief that nothing would happen to that pound because we were pretty emphatic as to how important it was to the town and asked that we be contacted if there was any change of heart. We were not contacted. That said, they've been cooperative, and I want to keep this on a positive light. I want to be able to go in there on Wednesday morning and move the stones so that we can ultimately relocate. But no, we had no warning that those stones were coming down on Saturday.
And did other residents complain about the animal pound, or is it just the people at 9?
Well, the pound, there are no animals that go in the pound now. It's simply an historic structure comprised of stones in a 15-foot by 18-foot enclosure. And no, we've got no other complaints. I don't think anybody else is really affected by it except for the property owner, since it's on their property.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, Mr. West.
Frank West, 2 Birchwood Road. I was wondering if I could sit over there, I have a couple of questions, and I have a couple of things that I'd like to handle with.
Certainly, why don't you bring, hold the phone. Be happy to receive whatever paperwork you have, but I'd ask, no reason why we can't field the questions there.
My first question is regarding the Swain School. Basically, you and I had some email traffic going back and forth. Quite frankly, I had asked to be on the agenda, and unfortunately, for whatever reason, you disallowed me under agenda, but you asked that I could speak on the public comments. But that being said, if the town meeting votes to actually knock the school down, is the plan to just put the parking lot where the foundation of the school is, or the entire grassed area, or what's the plans for that? What is the proposal?
If we could, before, I'm going to ask the manager to respond to that, but let's make sure that we're being clear here. I don't want there to be some misunderstanding that there's no reason why I'd indicated that I didn't think it was wise to schedule an agenda item. If you're going to make reference to that, let's make sure we're clear. As I indicated to you by email, which I received Friday morning, and to which I responded Friday morning, I indicated to you that I thought it would be unfair to folks who might take a certain position on any warrant article to take the opportunity and be afforded that opportunity to have an agenda item set aside for them to be able to express their point of view. It's my opinion that the process allows folks the opportunity to express that point of view in a number of different forums, all of which are available to everyone, and specifically the Finance Committee hearing that takes place on all of the warrant articles. I also need to make sure that you and I don't have a misunderstanding. The reason why I indicated I thought it made sense, and I assured you that I would recognize you under public comment, is because I do want to afford you the opportunity to speak. I don't want to stifle public debate over anything. But let's be clear, you know, this board has set aside time on its agenda, and on 20 different occasions since the beginning of February have discussed items which will be of substance at the town meeting, and it makes sense to give everybody that same opportunity, especially this late in the game. So having said that, and if you want to engage further in that debate, I will, but you know, frankly, I hear your first question, happy to respond to them if you'd like a response to that.
The only reason why I actually I wanted to be set aside as agenda, because I know typically public comments is for something, you know, reasonably quick, or a request from the board or something like that. And that's why I've notified both you and the manager, you know, specifically what I wanted to discuss. Said it would take probably about 10 minutes, and I figured that that would be more appropriate under agenda, but I understand your position as chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
There's no plans to touch the grass area.
So the only thing that would be, the actual school would be knocked down and hot topped over for...
The footprint, we would hot top over at this point.
That would get probably about 20 odd parking spaces.
I don't know, because, I mean, we're not doing it, the purpose of doing this is not to create parking. But I presume that there will end up being more room there for parking, but that's not the purpose of it, so no one's done any calculation for that. There's no need to do that.
But what I'd like to do, and again, I belong to no town committee, I just represent myself. As you know, I was a former member of the Historical Commission, and quite frankly, I served in this board as well. But again, I represent solely myself. But with that being said, just a couple of things that I'd like to first and foremost show you is that, you know, this is the school we're talking about. This is our town calendar from last year. So I mean, the school, I mean, from a photogenic standpoint, give or take, it may be attractive, maybe an old brick building to people. But anyhow, from the Historical Commission standpoint, I don't know if you guys, you know, formally know what their position is. And they put a letter here in the town crier. And their first and foremost said that they support saving the building and hopefully incorporating it into a municipal building. It is certainly worth saving for future use. It would be wonderful if the citizens of Wilmington voted for preservation. But that being said, they are aware of the condition of the building, and based on the three conditions that if the building were to be taken down, the three conditions that they're looking for would be, one, to preserve the frieze, which is basically high school 1914 on the very top of the building. I believe they're looking for access to the building for, bless you, Mr. Carroll. They're looking for access to the building to remove any historical, you know, blackboards, whatever they may want to take. And thirdly, they're looking to be involved in whatever building, if in the future a building is built on the site, so that it goes with the historical district. And if I may hand this letter to you, if you want. Sure. And again, that's their words, not mine. I've done a bit of research. I've talked to several of our board members, and I'd like to offer a different approach as opposed to demolition. I'd like to see if we could offer preservation. And what I'm saying by preservation, I'm not saying that every brick has to be in place, every chalkboard has to be in place, but the integrity of the building. I believe that if the board, instead of voting to knock the building down, if you voted to preserve the building and gave the $160,000 that we're talking about, or a portion of it, that could be used for preferably, you know, matching type grant funds, that the building could actually be saved in some fashion, that could become a town hall. I understand what the building looks like. As a former member of the Historical Commission, a former selectman, I sat here and we talked about the West Schoolhouse back in 2002. We were able to get $103,000 from the state, had the kids from Shawshene Tech do a wonderful job putting it together. The town was intimately involved, Mr. Kyra, all you board, you know, the board members at the time, and they were able to, you know, to basically get what we got, you know, a real showcase of the building down there. And I think that we could do something similar with the Swain. I understand that the asbestos is an issue, but whether we kept the building or knocked it down, the asbestos has to be removed first. One other letter that I don't understand why was not read into the agenda, but here's a letter, if I may, Mr. Chairman, from Preservation Massachusetts, specifically signed off by James Igo. And basically, without reading the letter, I'll give you copies of it, and the press also has it.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We do have a copy of that letter that, I know it was dated April 14th. We actually got it Wednesday or Thursday of last week, and it inadvertently was omitted from our package, but since then, we've all got one, so thank you.
Right. But again, Preservation Massachusetts, they're looking, obviously their job is to preserve. What I would be looking for from the board is at least consideration that, it seems like this happened relatively quick. I know that the building's been in a state, but we've always had a tenant in there, or one or more tenants in there, being WCTV and anybody else. What I'm thinking is that if this could be dropped from the warrant article, or if the 160 could be used to at least be fenced temporarily, to see if we could garnish a committee, offered by you, by the Board of Selectmen, to in some fashion preserve the structure. I think that using state funds, federal grants, maybe, as most of you are probably aware, that one of the things the Historical Commission's looking at is eventually with the Butters Farm, they're looking at restoring it and selling it with historical restrictions. That's been announced at their public meeting. That could give about, maybe $400,000 or so that you could have matching grants on. I think that the building could be designed in such a fashion that it could, be designed up front so that you could put some sort of a future addition on it and make a town administration and school administration building. And all I'm asking is that if there's a way that we could have a chance to do that. The building's, I know that the building is in disrepair, but it's not like it's, oh my God, falling down. It's probably in better shape than the West Schoolhouse when we were literally at the same forum. So I didn't know if we could have some consideration on that. At least, I think we should talk about it a little bit before we just vote to knock it down.
And it seems to me, and I won't impede any discussion that the Board of Selectmen wants to have, but from my perspective, these are the things that I would expect to talk about in the meeting, on the floor of town meeting. There's certainly things that, most of which, I won't say that, many of those points, I think, the board was cognizant of when we asked Mr. Hooper to come in on March 9th and discuss this warrant article in detail. And I think that certainly not all of those points, but a couple of those points I heard you make at the FinCom meeting on March 17th in the auditorium. So, from my perspective, I'm not inclined to debate all those points with you. I, again, want to give you the opportunity to speak. From my perspective, I don't necessarily agree with a lot of the points and maybe have different priorities, but that's okay. That's what the folks will vote on at town meeting on Saturday. So, are there any questions or comments? I don't want to inhibit the board from, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just make a couple of quick comments, just to speak for a moment. I know Frank had mentioned saying that he thought this came pretty quickly. I've been serving on the board for a long time. There's been discussion of this for years, whether we were going to put a building or we were going to tear it down. And I think we all can agree that this is a different kind of animal compared to the West School, this Swain School. And I think the chairman has handled the format pretty professional by, allowing you to speak here and public comments on it. And Frank, being a former member of the Board of Selectmen, there is a process, and it is on the town meeting floor. And you have every right to make amendments. You have every right on the town meeting floor to, to rally, folks there to defeat the article. And I did watch the public hearing on TV, and you did express your view. And I respect what you have to say, but I just think, there's a process, and I think you know how the process works. And just let it take its course. But once again, this hasn't come quickly. We've been talking about this for years. And I think most folks out in the audience and watching TV and the press knows it's been a discussion ongoing and going. And I think it's time for us to make a decision one way or the other what we're going to do with the building. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board? Mr. West, anything else?
Well, and again, not to debate the subject, but I think that there has been discussion for a period of time of what to do with the building, Mike. Agree with you wholeheartedly. But I think that when it all of a sudden showed up that hey, you know what, we're not gonna talk about it anymore, we're just gonna knock it down. And that seems to be what I'm getting from the board, even though there may have been discussion on, we may do something with the building, renovate, or let it fall into repair. I think right now, just in closing, the economy is tough, people are out of work, I understand all that. Right, and that economy is tough for not only Wilmington, but all the surrounding communities. What I'm thinking is that a lot of communities do not have the ability to do a matching grant. If we got the 160, it would give us some portion to get into a matching grant. There are emergency funds, I'm sure Mr. Kyra is probably aware of, through the Mass Historical Preservation. There are other ways that we can get money, and all I'm saying is that instead of knocking the building down, we could renovate it, plan for an addition. I'm not saying to put an addition on today, plan for an addition, and this way here, it could be a town hall, school administration building, hopefully either mainly state and federal funded, or certainly a lot less Wilmington tax dollars than what will go into what we will someday call Wilmington Town Hall on that site. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
I do just want to, first of all, recognize George Hooper, who's a superintendent of public buildings. First of all, thank you for making yourself available tonight. I know that you made a trip to the board on March 9th specifically to go through those things. So I don't want you to be on the spot. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you if you have any comment. If you have no comment, that's fine. But if you have anything to say, certainly feel free.
Nothing that I haven't already said. This Wayne School in its current condition, I feel, is a liability to the town. And so that's why the Public Buildings Department put a fence around it, because of the brick facade, actual pieces of the building coming down, falling off the building. So, given the economic climate and what's happening now, I think it would be a good time to approach this to the residents.
All right, well, let's, okay, if you don't mind, any other comments up here?
Just briefly, I just want to reiterate what Selectman McCoy said. This matter has been before the community on a number of occasions, and just a few years ago, we came to the community with the proposal that folks who did not want the library at the Whitfield School pushed us to have a new library at the Swain School site. Obviously, the Swain School was coming down, and what we were going to do was incorporate in the design a bit of a Swain School look, but the Swain School itself was not going to remain, and as a matter of fact, the Historical Commission chairperson supported that position because we were going to incorporate the look, but the building, in fact, was coming down. So to suggest that there hasn't been discussion, there's been town meeting discussion, specific discussion about that. The other point is, we did receive that letter from Mr. Igo, who I contacted that office, and Mr. Igo talked in that letter about the condition of the Swain School, and I asked when Mr. Igo was last there, and I was told he was never there. And then the person on staff indicated that the building was in mild disrepair. And again, she had never been inside the building. Several years ago, we were looking at upwards to $3 million to put that building back together, and for what purpose? You know, that really is the problem. Once you start doing any work in there, now you need to bring that building fully up to code, and again, for what purpose? When Mr. Hooper mentioned that he's concerned about a liability, so am I, so is the building inspector, so shouldn't this entire board be, with the condition of that building. We couldn't get WCTV out of there fast enough, as my good friends over in the corner would attest. That building is not in the kind of condition that would constitute some operation going in there, and I don't believe that the town ought to be putting good money into a building like that. With regard to grant programs, Sure, I'm familiar with grant programs, and I'm familiar with the fact, although you talk in large amounts of money, there is a limitation on the construction grant program of $50,000. So it's a $50,000 match. That's great, but that's not going to really get the town very far when it has other things to do. So I really believe it's in the best interest of the community to take the building down, to do so in cooperation with the Historical Commission to memorialize the building, and then to use that site for a future municipal facility the same way so many prior boards and committees have recommended. That's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
One final comment. The lady you speak of, just so you know, her name is Ann Dodge, and her and I actually walked the site. We did not go in the building as the building was walked, but I just want to let you know that she spent, and that's her profession, is looking at these type structures. And she was impressed at the fact, obviously saddened by the state of the building. And I'm not saying that a paintbrush and a hammer is going to fix all the problems down there. I certainly understand what you're saying. But, she did say where it was, especially where it was located. I believe matching state grants, by the way, and I could be wrong with this, but from the research I've read, is up to $100,000 on construction grants. And in some cases, there's 75% matching if there's additional town funds that are put into like a trust. And again, this is all I'm reading from various websites. But again, all I'm asking this gentleman is that, for consideration, that could the town, instead of knocking the building down, come up and say, we'd like to preserve the building, and you fine gentlemen could offer to the town a committee, call it, just like we did with the Hinden Tavern. You get the Friends of the Hinden Tavern. You could have a Friends of the Swain School. But again, it's up to the will of town meeting and up to the will of voters. But again, I think that we could just ultimately have a town hall and a lot less money for the town. Thank you.
Okay. New business or committee reports? Start.
I'd just like to, once again, Mr. Chairman, just I'd like to congratulate and welcome the newest member of the Wilmington Board of Selectmen, Mr. Shampoo. I understand his first name is Mike as well, so there's 4 Mikes up here, and I think I'll go out on a limb how we're going to decide who's going to be who. I'm saying is maybe, as you being the new member, I think I would consider you Small Mike. And then I would have to go on a limb. I would have to say the chairman, he'd be Medium Mike. And then I'd go to the TM and say he'd be Large Mike. And obviously, I'd like to bring back McDonald's, and I'd be Supersized Mike. But anyway, I just thought I'd mention it. Welcome to the board, and there's 4 Mikes up here.
Thank you, Mike.
I'm good. I'd just like to congratulate Mike, too.
Thank you.
Same here. Congratulations to Mr. Shampoo. Congratulations to Jane Miller in the back. We understand you were elected to the Tewksbury School Committee. Congratulations. And I had one item, Mike, I know, well, I guess it's more for the board. At some point soon, I'm going to ask the manager to bring in the appropriate person or people to talk about the town's website. I had fielded a couple of questions in that regard, I think a little over a week ago. And I talked to Mike about it, and he indicates we've actually been doing some work, and that's ongoing, trying to improve the website. And it's not something I had really paid attention to, so we'll bring somebody in. Anything down here?
So that's to me? Okay, cool. Yeah, well, I want to say thank you all. I'm very excited and honored to have the opportunity to serve with you and to serve the residents of Wilmington. So thank you for that. I would also like to request of Mr. Kyra, if it's at all possible, if we could schedule for a future meeting someone from whatever the right agency is that is in charge of the project that's going on Lowell Street, the bridge. That I've had a few residents ask me, what's going on with the bridge? And truthfully, I haven't had a good answer because I'm not sure there is a lot of information known. We see lots of work going on, but I'd love to have some update from someone as to the status and when that should be complete, et cetera. Additionally, not to add fuel to any panic or fire, but you can't help but turn on the news and see people talking about this swine flu thing. And perhaps it wouldn't be a horrible idea for someone, I suspect it's Shelley Newhouse, to be available or maybe even be prepared to make a presentation of what resources there are for people, our residents, to reach out and learn about what they need to do or what should happen if the state or if the government says there is a pandemic. We don't want to cause panic. I think people armed with information can avoid being in a panic state. We don't know where this is going. Hopefully it goes nowhere, but in the absence of information, people will tend to panic, and hopefully we can disperse some information. That is all from me.
Just to comment on that, I had not talked to Mike about this, but we always try to be prepared and assume that there may be a question about this, and so I did talk with the Director of Public Health today, Shelley Newhouse, and the Department of Public Health and the Department of Agriculture are urging people, you know, to recognize what's going on, but not to panic and not to be specifically alarmed. But I agree that it would be helpful to have information available. We have a public health fact sheet that just came out on the swine flu, and I can certainly provide copies to the to the newspapers if they'd like. But according to the Department of Agriculture, and Ms. Newhouse has been talking with the various state agencies and getting any directives. In the United States right now, there are no swine flu cases in swine, and so let me clarify what that means. That there are no swine, there are no pigs, according to the Mass Department of Agriculture, who are infected with the disease who are in the United States. There are people, as you've read about, because they have been in contact with Mexico. And so they are as concerned now about people infecting swine, believe it or not, or obviously people infecting people, the human-to-human kind of thing. I can tell you the Department of Agriculture has been in contact with all of the pig farmers and has had discussions with all of them. But you should also know that the swine influenza is not new, that people normally do not get swine flu, but they can become sick, as they have, from human infections. But in fact, in the United States, the swine flu infected 12 people. There were 12 cases from 2006 through 2008. There now, because of the outbreak in Mexico, are more cases of swine flu going on. Also, there's a number of interesting things in here that talks about how people can deal with this. There is no vaccine. We've contacted the school departments, particularly because some folks might have gone away on spring break, that kind of thing, and have urged them to, treat it like they should, and that is to make sure they sanitize, etc. The other question that has been asked, is it safe to cook and eat pork and pork products? And the answer to that is yes. That's not a problem. But I'm glad you brought it up, and I will distribute this public health fact sheet. And if anybody has any questions or concerns, more and more information will be coming out. I can assure you that the health director is staying abreast of this issue, and if it's the board's wishes to have her in at some point in the future, we'd be happy to arrange that as well.
Might be interesting information for your updated website.
There you go.
Mr. Chairman. If I may, once again, those are valid points. I would like to talk about the project. Believe me, there's nobody in this community wants to see him out of here more than me. And just to give you an update, I think it's a good point to have the Mass Highways here and the contractor, but Bill Murphy from Mass Highways has given me an update Thursday, and he's telling me that they're going to be out of Dodge by the end of May of this year. So he's made that promise that they're going to be out of here at the end of May. And like I said, he's been really good. He's been giving me many updates on what's going on. Maybe what they really need to do is contact the town manager's office. But I just heard this Thursday afternoon, and they promised me by Friday it'd be 2 lanes and no more 1-lane traffic. Well, lo and behold, today was one-lane traffic. So obviously, I'd like to give Mr. Murphy a call tomorrow and just, I do have his new cell number, and give him a call to see what the story is. So believe me, that's, at least there's some light at the end of the tunnel here, and I hope that happens. Thank you.
So, bless you.
Thank you.
Yeah, why don't we plan on tentatively scheduling something for them? If they're gone by May, they're gone by May.
Yeah, I agree. I think maybe at the next meeting would be wonderful. Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Important dates?
Curbside collection of yard waste, Mr. Chairman, continues this week through May 1st, and then picks up for one last week in the spring, May 11th through May 15th. A reminder again, the annual town meeting at the high school at 10:30 in the morning on Saturday, May 2nd. Advance notice that there is a Good Guy Award dinner on May 8th. The Household Hazardous Waste Day will be conducted at the West Intermediate School parking lot on May 9th, Saturday, May 9th. It's an annual event from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. You can get information on the DPW website as to what can be brought. We'll also have something in the newspapers. And then just advance notice that on May 12th, there is the registration for Tiny Tots and Kids Club here at the Town Hall Auditorium from 5 to 7 p.m. And for those that are interested, the next Tri-Town Task Force meeting is May 7th in Andover at 8 a.m. That's it.
We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.